Welcome, everyone, to this dialogue with the author. So this is hosted by the Taos Institute. I'm Alex Arnold. I'm the executive consultant for the Taos Institute. I'll say a very brief word about our organization. We're a nonprofit educational organization, a virtual organization. And we promote social constructionist, relational, and appreciative ideas and practices around the world. And we try to do so through many, many different ways. Some free events like this dialogue with the author. We have Taos conversations on a variety of topics, usually twice a month or so. We also have an online community that is probably where you found this event and when you signed in for this event. So the Taos Institute Commons is open to everyone, really trying to gather people interested in those ideas and sharing resources, connecting with one another. So it's really a platform for all of you to use. We encourage you to post your comments and resources, questions, connect with each other through this platform. And recordings of events like today's event will also be posted in the Taos Commons. We also do workshops and courses. We have one course, Introduction to Social Construction, that is a 6-week online course that is starting September 9th. And if you haven't considered it or know anyone who might be interested, we encourage you to spread the word. It's starting soon. And that is about it about the Taos Institute. I don't want to take too much of our precious time with our guest today, Lindsey Godwin. Thank you so much for being here today to talk about your new book, How to Love a Question. I'm so pleased to have you here, and I will just let you take it from here.
Thank you so much, Alex. It's such a joy to connect with, I feel like, my intellectual and just colleague, friends and family in the Taos Institute. So thank you all for joining us for an hour. I know time is a precious resource, and so it's a gift to be with you all here for a little bit. My name is Lindsey Godwin. I go by Lindsey. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm joining you from the beautiful shores of Lake Champlain in the Green Mountain state of Vermont here in my home office just outside of Burlington, Vermont. Those of you that aren't familiar with me or my work, I don't joke. I proudly own that I'm a professor. I'm a practitioner of strength-based work, appreciative inquiry, and positive organizational change. And really, I feel I'm a possibilitizer, is what I want to say, hopefully for myself and for others. And a lot of that work is through my work, social construction, grounded, appreciative inquiry work. I serve as a business professor here at Champlain College. So if anybody's ever in Vermont and wants to visit, you are welcome to come visit us. And I work not just with, of course, with my students, trying to get the next generation of organizational leaders to be curious leaders and sort of dialogic co-construction thinkers in their own right. But I also work with organizations sort of across the world. I serve as the academic director of the Cooper Center for Appreciative Inquiry at Champlain College, and I have long been a part of the appreciative inquiry and the Taos community, again, doing work with organizations, big and small, for-profit, nonprofit, education with cities. And for me, appreciative inquiry work, again, so grounded on social constructionist principles. These two words, appreciative, and inquiry, if you really pushed me to sort of look at which word was, if I was to give 51%, 49%, which one's more important, I would put the emphasis on inquiry. I know a lot of us and a lot of people are drawn to appreciative inquiry from the appreciative, the strength-based perspective, which it definitely is why it is a unique sort of presence in the change community. But really at its heart, it's about inquiry. It's about asking questions about what gives life to us when we are at our best, whether that's us individually, whether that's us sort of in teams and families and communities and organizations. And so at its heart, it really is all about questions. One of the principles, those of you that are familiar, I'm curious just in the text chat, how many of you are familiar with appreciative inquiry? This isn't a lecture on appreciative inquiry. I just wanted to sort of set the stage for why I wrote this book. And so just curious in the text chat, If you want to put if yes, you're familiar with or you've used, or if you aren't that familiar with appreciative inquiry. Um, oh, great, Luis. Yeah, we'll have using in your PhD. Oh, wonderful. Good. So I'll have to come and get more information in cases that you all are doing. So, and I know, Kristen, you use it in every piece and part of your life. So, and great, and Mitch, so that's great. But familiar, heard of it, so it's wonderful. At least I know in the Taos community, when I say AI, you probably maybe will let me know that I'm talking about appreciative inquiry and not artificial intelligence. I know this is our current discourse. But for me, yes, appreciative inquiry, one of the principles of appreciative inquiry is the simultaneity principle. This idea that change starts with the very first time we ask, every question we ask is a change intervention. Change doesn't start after we ask a bunch of questions, which often has been the mindset, especially in organizational development and change. We'll go do surveys, we'll sort of ask questions, sort of to gather information, get the lay of the land. But the idea in appreciative inquiry with the simultaneity principle is change and inquiry are simultaneous moments. Every question we ask is an intervention. And so with that, I think when we really recognize that, it's both empowering, maybe it's a little overwhelming, this recognition that every question we ask has the power to sort of intervene in our thinking, intervene and direct the path of conversations, of possibilities that people are considering. And so the framing of questions is very important in appreciative inquiry. Are we framing and sort of looking at what we want to move toward, not just what we want to move away from? But all of that is to say, so I have been steeped in this world of questions and appreciative inquiry and social construction. And one of my greatest dreams for myself was I've always wanted to write a children's book. I'm a mother myself. I have two teenagers. My son is starting his senior year in high school. My daughter's a sophomore. I have many nieces and nephews. The educator in me knows that the best way to, influence minds is perhaps not to get them when they are in their professional sphere, but sort of going upstream and really looking at, if these principles of appreciative inquiry are so important to me, and I see the impact that they have in organizations and in professionals when they start adopting them later on, how can we start introducing them earlier and earlier and earlier? And so that was part of my motivation. And also, I believe that children's books are powerful. Some of the most impactful stories, messages that I've taken in my own life have come in the form of children's books. So you can think for yourself, perhaps books that have sparked for you. Looking at my shelves right now, I have some great books. Of course, the big Dr. Seuss fan, and others. I have What Would You Do with an Idea? The Book of Mistakes. Yesterday we were talking about the Sesame Street, the monster at the end of this book, for those of you that are familiar with that. But I'm curious, if there are children's books that have just been important for you, The Giving Tree, other things that have sort of been messages in my life that I've taken forward. I'd love to sort of hear in the text chat, or you can come off mute, if there are children's books that are really much more than children's books. They are messages for life for us. Does anybody have some of those in their own life? Curious. Have you filled a bucket today? That's such a good one. This one that's in our house too, Luis. That's a great one. Any others? Yeah. Oh, Chicken Sunny and Amazing Grace. I know so many, Kristen. It's hard to do the crayon box that talked. I love that. There's also in Mitch, there's a whole The Day the Crayons Left and stuff is in our house. There's a whole series of different ones. The crayon box that talked. I love it. So again, I invite, there's sort of this idea of thinking about all the different ways that we communicate and that we co-create information and the sharing of values. What is important to us, and how do we communicate that to the next generation? But also, how do we use children's books as tools, regardless of age? So that's what when I talk about this book that I wrote, I want to actually just spend a few minutes here, and Alex is giving me the gift of, I'm going to do just a quick reading of my book so that you can experience it for yourself. And then I would like to stop my own sort of talking and really engage in sort of a dialogue with you about, again, the nature of questions, the power of questions, how questions shape our ourselves, our relationships with each other. And really, for me, the question too is, how can we continue to create and support cultures of curiosity and question asking? We know all of the data in our world that, you know, we are born these curious creatures, naturally inquisitive. You know, the average child asks about 125 questions a day, and the average adult asks about 6. So something happens, right? We are, all of the reasons we can unpack that, you know, why is that? I would love to unpack that. There's been research on that I can share. But for me, it's less about understanding. I think we know a lot of the reasons why that happens. And for me, the generative appreciative question is, how do we create cultures of co-inquiry together where we really, regardless of age, retain our curious heart? So with that, I'm going to screen share and give you guys a little reading of my book, and then we'll dive in. Does that sound okay? All right. So you guys wouldn't tell me otherwise. It's okay. Like, sure, that sounds great. So let me see if I can get my screen here to share. So I have, this is a, the book is, this is, I'll show you sort of a flip version of the book. You guys can see that? Can you see that okay? Let me make my screen sort of full screen there. Yep, great. And I was telling Alex, this has worked well. Sometimes I will say, get this tool, sometimes like all online things, sometimes a little ad pops up. And if it does, I will just close it down. So it is not my intention that you see an ad. Is really that. I just wanted to let you know that the tool that it uses, sometimes it embeds an ad. So here's the book, How Do You Love a Question? And we'll talk about the illustrations I created as well with some help from our generative, the other AI tool as well. So we can talk about, for me, the words and the images were important as well. So here we go. How do you love a question? So starts with this, one of my favorite quotes: be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart and try to love the questions themselves. That's just a little snippet from that quote. Some of you might know that quote. So here we go. What could that be? Should we turn the page and see? Should we turn the page and see? Okay. Alex says we can turn the page. All right. It's a question buzzing around. What do you think it wants when it makes that sound? Does it want to come inside and be our pet? What name would you give the question that it would never forget? Anybody? I'd love if you can stick in the text chat. If there's a name that you would give a question, what name would you give the question? So feel free to answer the questions yourself in the text chat. Could it want a place to rest? Might you build the question, a house in which to nest? I'm thinking about, yeah, what would you build? What would your house look like if you were building the question, a house? Does it want food? If you made the question its favorite meal, what would it include? What would a question want to eat? Maybe it's in the mood for a tune. What song would get the question to sing along with a bassoon? What question, what songs would get the question up up and dancing? Would it like to hear a story? If you wrote a book for the question, what would the hero do for glory? What would be your story? Ooh, it seems to want something more. What else could we explore? This question is not happy yet. Might it want to go for a hot air balloon ride? If you could float away with the question, where would you hide? Does it want to visit a circus tent? What tightrope tricks might the question invent? What new tricks could you imagine this question doing? Perhaps it wants to take a trip to the zoo. If the question could talk to animals, what would it say with a moo? Could it want to dig for treasures in the sand? What kind of shells would the question use to make its castle grand? All of those different building tools at the ocean. Does it want to travel in a rocket to Mars? What new things might the question discover out past the stars? Something we're always asking as a community. The question still seems to want something from you and me. What else could we do? What if we ask the question to give us a clue? Question, how do we love you? And here's the question telling us, ask me. Could asking be the key? What is one question you want to ask, or two, or three? Oh, there's those hearts. Asking seems to make the question smile. What if we keep asking for a while? What if we keep asking questions and never quit? To love a question, you must ask it. But of course, that's not the end. The end, or is asking just the start? Can you keep asking the questions that are in your heart? And there's the end, right? And the whole, yes, that's the back of the book. That's all about, again, reminding readers from the very beginning, it's not even about the answers, right? It's about the joy of asking the questions. And my hope, and I've had these conversations with families, with teachers that have been using this book, that every time you read the book with somebody, whoever you're reading it with, whatever their age, that the sort of diving into the questions themselves is the joy, is the adventure, right? And so there's not any right answers to these questions. And every time you ask it is, well, what is the name I would give the question today? Well, what would I feed the question today, right? And so it really is an invitation to just lean into the adventure of asking those questions. And this idea of, again, even in the conversation of again, hearts and minds of all ages, but especially with children, getting them to sort of what are questions and curiosities that they have, and really celebrating that. Because as we know, again, as we move into school, we are rewarded for giving answers. We get the gold star for having the right answer, and not really for asking those questions. So I want to just sort of pause here and just open up dialogue together. And I'm curious for you just to hear, yeah, what's bubbling up from you from just even the seeds here, and really diving into how have you experienced sort of questions having an impact in conversations and your own relationships with others, and then would love to get into a dialogue of, how, especially in the world that we are navigating today, how can we help both adults and kids feel comfortable not knowing the answers right away, and really exploring questions together without rushing to answers. So I really believe that helps us to be more connected and creative. We talk about the fact that as the world becomes more complex and all of the things that we know, our answers actually have a shelf life, right? Our answers have this context where in which the answer to an issue, to a problem, only works sometimes not even for a day. We know how fast things are changing. But sort of staying in the question, staying with the question is really important. So things like, what does an effective educational experience look like? Well, before 2020, we had a vision of that. 20 2020 hits with COVID, we have different answers for what an effective education experience looks like. And now we're still grappling on the other side with trying to answer that together. What is an effective? So the question, right? Well, how do we create effective educational experiences is a great example of we talk about questions enduring, even as our answers maybe have a shelf life. So I'm going to pause, see what's bubbling up for you all, see what questions, what curiosities you have, and what's sparking for you. I love that. Oh, who am I looking at the text chat as I get caught up here? Excuse me.
I'll make a comment.
Yeah, Mitch, thanks.
Thanks, Lindsay. That was great. I love the book. Congratulations.
Thanks.
I am a therapist, mainly practicing from a narrative therapy worldview. So questions are sort of
huge,
the bread and butter. And they're super generative and transformative. And I think the place that I'm at now in my work is I'm still expanding the question sort of inventory always. And to your point, the answers sort of sometimes work one day, but I do think it's a journey and a generative journey. But when clients have their answers or their journey that emerges, but then have to step out into the world that doesn't operate in that same mindset. So when appreciative inquiry or generative questions are like, what your change is based on or how you're sort of peeling back the veil of the world, but the rest of your interactions don't support that, how do you stay in the question? That's the biggest thing that I think I'm grappling with in my evolution as a therapist and to support clients in that way.
I so appreciate that, Mitch, from an individual perspective. My original love was psychologist. Once upon a time in sort of studying psychology, and then moved into the organizational development realm. And that question holds true for both individuals and for organizations, for teams, right? I see that exactly as even teams or leaders start stepping into different questions in an organizational space, and then still they're still then sort of coming up against the but everybody hasn't had this epiphany or to your point, and like we hold each other, like I'm holding myself in a new space and people aren't updating their perception of me, right? Or their whatever. And so there is this, and I know you could probably tell all of us more. Wonderful. I'd love to hear the things that you do with your clients of helping them to stay in that space. And also like, how do we sort of convey and continue to sort of teach, or again, I love, right, in Taos we always talk about like, we're constantly co-constructing ourselves and like through our interactions with others. And so it's sort of, I'm shifting, how do I invite others to change that co-construction of our dynamic together, but also just their perception of like, I'm different from myself than I was 5 minutes ago, right? So how am I staying in that curiosity mindset of, and I do this like even as a parent, right? Like, how do I stay in like my daughter is a different person today than she was yesterday because of things she's watched, things she's thought about, people she's talked to, and how do I stay in that curiosity mindset to even see her, right? Let alone then our mother-daughter dynamic together. And then who am I as the mother, right? We could go into all the things, Mitch. So we'd love to have coffee sometime. Other things bubbling for people are these examples of, when questions have maybe really changed the conversation for you, or when there's powerful questions that are in your repertoire. I'm sure, Mitch, you have great ones. When you're thinking about coaching with people, are there the questions that are sort of your go-to questions with people?
Lindsay, this is Kristen.
Hi,
Kristen. Hi. I'm struck, Mitch, thanks for jumping in there and sharing that. I'm struck with also too, is as Mitch, you're practicing and others are practicing, I find like lately I've been having these experiences where there's a lot of what's the right word? Solutions or ideas or owning expertise that's engaging in a conversation and it starts getting, the energy is very, very high, and there's people with different ideas and they're kind of, in a way, almost fighting to be heard or understood. And the questions have been so good at like kind of slowing that down and allowing a different space. So there's this piece of just practice of pausing and slowing. And for me, it's kind of connecting with what's going on in my body and my heart and other spaces as well, and getting out of my head a little bit to tap into and be open to curiosity to have that shift happen. Anyway, I'm curious what others have experienced with that, when there might be room for more curiosity and questions, ways to shift that in conversations.
What a great question. Definitely the slowing down. What's bubbling up for folks from that?
Hi, Lindsay. Hi,
Hi.
everyone. Hi, I'm Leanne. I am in Brisbane in Australia. It's just after midnight here, so I'm in my jammies. I'm sorry.
Thank you for joining us. No
Thank
apology. No
you
apology.
for putting this. That was absolutely beautiful. I love your book, Lindsay. The words, the journey that it took us on, the illustrations were absolutely gorgeous. Thank you. Like Mitch, I'm a narrative therapist. And so, yeah, go narrative therapy. Thanks, Michael White and David Epstein. I've also done a couple of other things. My initial degree was in journalism, and I also did a master's degree in librarianship. So I've had a couple of careers, and I say that the thread that weaves them all together is the art of a good question. And in narrative, I have really the power of questions is just amazing, because in narrative, we're not the experts. We will walk alongside people and hopefully ask them questions that they never knew they needed to be asked. One of the things, just leading on from what Kristen had said there about the importance of a pause, because I find even with great questions, a lot of people want to answer from their head. And I love a pause, a powerful pause that can help people drop down into their heart. And so we've been talking about a curiosity mindset, and I'm wondering what it would take for us to be able to also encourage people, including our kids, to have a curiosity heart set, and to really be able to sit with and contemplate questions from the heart, rather than, as you said, Lindsay, we are rewarded in this culture with our thinking, with good thinking, but it's really our heart and the heartfelt connections that we can make with people that can really make a difference. So I think that pause is a really critical part of dropping down into that heart space.
Can I tap into that?
Yeah, please.
Well, yeah, and that makes me think of one of my favorite questions is when I do ask a question and I watch the body exhale, and then you can see the heart reacting, and I'll just go, what just happened to your heart? Not what happened to your body or what happened to your head, but the question then is, what happened to your heart? And it just situates the conversation in like a whole universe that they never jump into. And then we get to talk about the body and the mind and the spirit and all the things. So I am right there with you. Heart work, overhead work, all day long. But it's so different, so radically different than what they get asked in their day-to-day. And I'm going to be quiet now.
No, please don't be quiet, Mitch. I love it. Jump in. Others, I love this. It's so true. The power of the pause. And I think that, I don't know, Leanne, if you've just coined this or if a thing, but I think that we're all going to be using that phrase of the shifting of the mindset. I'm curious, because that's one of the biggest things that I see is that questions do. And one of the I do that for myself of like when I need a minute to think, or like you said, it's like we're getting in, we're in conversations with people and both creating a space for questions and asking a question in and of itself creates a pause, right? Because I mean, there's actually a reflex that happens, we know, sort of neurologically, when a question is asked. It's called instinctive elaboration. Like our brains literally can't not try to answer a question. Like even for a split second, right? Like our brains are programmed. It's interesting to sort of blend the sort of neurology with what you're saying, sort of the whole body presence, but there is something that actually happens, this mental sort of reflex, like when we ask a question, this instinctive elaboration that, like what are you planning to have for breakfast tomorrow? Your brain immediately for at least 2 seconds, like we'll start thinking about the, again, I mean, it's just, that's what I'm like, every question isn't literally an intervention. And so I love that, Mitch, too, and Leanne and Kristen, this idea that, sometimes, we can use questions as tools for pausing and the content of the question, right? Then also like what just happened to your heart? That question is an intervention for people to then pay attention to, I was just right, like I feel different, right? So that question itself, again, every question we ask is that simultaneity principle of appreciative inquiry. I keep coming back to every question is an intervention because it literally is sort of tapping in and taking over our attention mentally, physically, heartfelt, even for just a moment. A question does that. But other things that are bubbling. I'm looking at our great text chat here too.
Yeah, apologies first of all that I had to step away for a minute or two. I had to take a quick phone call, but I hope I'm picking up the gist of the conversation. Okay, I suppose when I think about questions and questions that really mean something to me, I really love when I think about kind of what questions that I might think about with other people. I suppose the questions that I would hold for myself is when Nora Bateson talks about who can I be when I'm with you and who can we be when we're with each other. I think for me, there's something about when we ask a question, we open up that space of who can we be with each other within that question that we've asked, or who can I be when I'm with you, or someone else, who can they be with me? Like, I suppose I wonder about that relational space that a question opens up for us to potentially be with each other in a certain space and that as well. So
what a beautifully inviting question that is, Louise. That is, who can we be together? And again, I love that as an example of like, and the answer to that should constantly change, right? I mean, that we're constantly sort of, again, it's not necessarily about getting the answer to that question. It's literally about living in that question over and over and over again. I love that. Other things, other powerful, questions that that are in your toolboxes that you use for yourself or with others to create these relational spaces.
Louise, what you just said, and Lindsey, what you said earlier about your teenage kids. So I have a teenager too, and what I think that's such a beautiful thing when we can do. Teenagers often feel like they don't have a place to voice their opinion, or their opinion doesn't matter as much. So asking the question of, who do you want to be? Who do we want to be together? Or how do you want this to go? How would you like this conversation to end up? Or this conversation is not going so well. How could we together bring it or in a different direction? So I find it really, it's really neat to practice that and see the effect. I mean, sometimes on, especially on teenagers in my case.
Yeah. Teenagers provide all their wonderful learning for us all, don't they? Constantly, Alex. And I love that. I mean, it's a reminder with my teenagers, with my husband, with my colleagues, sometimes also being curious as to, like, for myself and with them, of what is the relational space they're interested in me holding. Especially I'm thinking with some of my colleagues, or especially with my husband, we do professional things together and family things and life things. And, so sometimes just getting curious, like, how do you want me to be listening right now? Are we listening for, am I listening for support? Am I listening for solutions? Am I listening just to sort of be a listening space for you? Sometimes I really work to get curious with that, and with my colleagues, of to get curious as to not just always assume, back to what you're saying, Mitch, like we play different roles, right? And this even, Lisa, you're saying, like, how do we want to be together? Sort of constantly recognizing that actually we play many different roles together. Kristen, I'm curious, I saw you put in the chat, something just happened in your heart when Louis said that. What I'm curious now, my question is, what's going on in your heart, Kristen?
Louise, it was something about how so I've been thinking about some situations this week where we're doing some community work in different situations, and really just like shifting my mindset or heart set to be asking that question about the relational space that we want to be creating, which goes deeper than the task at hand. And we had a situation where two gentlemen were very triggered with each other, and I was kind of getting discomfort with that and trying to figure out how to navigate it, and just like maybe pausing and just saying, hey, what's the relational space that we want to be with together? And how do we want to be showing up in the community as we're doing this work together? I love how and then I wish I would have written down exactly what you said that caused my heart to just go like, oh, like this, it was like a sob. How do you say the word sob? SALVE. I don't know, even know how to say that word. It was like an ointment. It was like a healing ointment. So thank you. Yeah. And sometimes it takes just kind of having the courage in the moment too, to create that space for those shifts to be opening, set that curiosity. So I just really appreciated that. Thank you.
Thanks, Kristen. Others, we haven't heard from, things bubbling for you, curiosities, impactful generative questions that you've asked, or again, even moments of your own experience when asking questions have shifted relationship dynamics for you.
Suppose another question that I really love. So I suppose I'm working with mothers in addiction recovery. And I suppose one of the things that I suppose I found really impactful is, I suppose, asking them to tell me about a time where they felt deeply understood. And for me, I suppose it opens up that relational space, because I suppose when you hear that, you can really attune into what that has meant for somebody, and not just assuming that we know what to understand means. Like, so I don't know, I suppose that question for me has always been, I feel it opens something up in the dynamic to really be present with somebody, and to, I suppose, set a potential space that you can co-create together then as well. So
I love that, Lisa. And I think that's so applicable for so many different topics. I see, again, in my work with organizations, really getting curious, even at a collective level, the same thing. So we've been doing a lot of different diversity, equity, and inclusion work with organizations, using sort of appreciative practices. And this one organization in particular realized that they needed to start with the very question for themselves individually and collectively of, what does inclusion mean? What does it look like? What does it feel like? When have I felt included here? What is it going to look like and feel like when we're all feeling that way? And so it was this beautiful sort of, we're not taking off the shelf a definition of like, this is what inclusion is, and this is how we're going to teach everybody, and these are the 5 things that you're going to do to include everybody or to create an inclusive environment. It really was this beautiful sort of dialogic, again, using appreciative sort of discovery work, and those familiar with appreciative inquiry, sort of discovery and dreaming and then designing work, but really holding the question sort of very similarly, at least sort of like, starting with very even just like, when is the time that you have felt sort of seen and valued for who you are and truly included here or elsewhere, so we can even understand sort of what does that mean, and then we can have a conversation of, okay, is that happening and not happening here, and how can we create then a organizational culture where everyone that steps foot into this organization feels that way for themselves, and not sort of a checkbox, like we've done these 5 things to create an inclusive organization, for example. Other thing is, I'm curious about this idea, sort of this balance. I love our conversations on the pause, and the pause that a question invites, and also your experience with living in, again, holding that pause. And I always say sort of living in and really sort of living in the question, rather than rushing to an answer. And it sort of may be paradoxical, because I just said when we ask a question, right, our brains have this elaboration, this triggered response to sort of immediately try to answer it. And at the same time, I sort of see this in groups and in organizations especially, right, is sort of like, how do we sort of really explore the space of a question rather than sort of jumping immediately to a solution. I'm curious, if there's practices, if there's experience of that, of, how can we really just, again, really live in that co-inquiry space. So again, it's less about the specific answer that we're driving to, and it's really more about living in that curiosity, co-inquiring space together. Thoughts on that, or other things that are bubbling up for people? I want to check our text chat here. There's good stuff coming in. Oh, Leanne, that's great. Would you expand on that? Contemplative practice has been useful for me to personally sit with and get to know a question that's on my mind. The elaboration on that, I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, so it's just, I guess, a kind of mindfulness practice, or a kind of meditation practice, where I'll sit with something, some question, something that's bothering me, and let it percolate. I won't rush for an answer. I'll sit with it. I'll sometimes offer myself prompts to look at it from different angles, to try to get under it, around it, over it, to see it from different perspectives. And sometimes just to sit with it, and invite it to show me what I might need to know, what might be useful to know about it, and just to let emerge and arise whatever might come. But it is that slow process that you mentioned, rather than trying to rush to an answer.
Oh, there's other thoughts on that, or your own practice. Yeah, Luis, I see you unmuting yourself.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, you're not trying to get to an answer. And it reminded me, I did course in the Eastside Institute a while back, and one of the games that we played was for one person, we started with a question, but you couldn't respond with an answer. You could only respond with a question. So everybody in the group, it was just an evolving of questions, but the connection that you felt, because it felt like while you were sharing your insight, you weren't stepping into a place where you had to know something. It was like we were all just sharing our questions, and it was just one of the most powerful things. It just still sticks with me. So it just came into my mind when you mentioned that there. So just how we can connect as well, like in questioning with each other's questions. So
I love that, Luis. There's again, a version of that that I see, and it's a tool that people have written about. It's called question storming. Have you guys ever have you heard of this? So instead of brainstorming, all right, we've all brainstormed, right, which is about trying to come up with answers to something, right? I mean, we're trying to come up with ideas, and there's this beautiful sort of flipping of that. There's an Inc. magazine article. It's called "Forget Brainstorming, Try Question Storming," that sort of explains it very beautifully. I can stick it in our Taos community thing, but I've done this similar with teams, with organizations. It's such a wonderful tool, and it can be done in like 10 minutes. I mean, it's not a big thing, but you start with sort of a known statement or a truth. So for organizations, just sort of generically, we need more customers, right? I mean, every organization's like, we need more customers, right? And instead of, typically, right, we'd brainstorm, well, how are we going to get customers? And then we would brainstorm a bunch of solutions. Taking, again, whatever the known truth is, whatever sort of some known truth is, and instead listing, just as you said, Louise, sort of only questions, as many questions, sort of in a time thing. Again, 8 minutes, 5 minutes. It's amazing. Only questions. So, well, how many customers is enough? Well, where do we get our first customers? Where do our customers go? Well, who are other, what are the customers we most want? I mean, just right, all it is just questions. And it's this beautiful way of sort of, again, getting people to shift into the curiosity mindset. And then it's a way too to sort of start seeing issues or challenges maybe in a new light of like, oh, we hadn't thought of that before. We hadn't, whatever. And then sort of taking the questions as to then, where's our energy? What are the questions that we've just sort of come up with that we actually are curious about answering together. But I love that. I mean, it's sort of because you're right. We so instinctively go to answering stuff. And so I invite you, yes, because I'm going to add that to my toolbox. And I invite you to think about this tool of question storming. It can be done, yes, at an individual level, with 2 people, with 200 people, that they just like brainstorming. But it's exactly that. It's really trying to shift people into just that. What are all the different ways we can curiously look at, especially something that we've taken as like a known in fact or something, right? It's a really fun tool. Oh, we can't unmute yourself. Let's see here. Are you able to unmute, Alex? I don't know if I can.
I can ask. There's a button to ask you to unmute you. But that's all I can do. Is that working, Tahara?
Oh, there. It looks like you're unmuted, Tahara. Is that true? Maybe.
Alex, do you have the phone number you could send it to Tahara? Maybe to call in. I don't know, Tahara, if that'll work for you being outside of the US.
But I wanna read in your post as you try to get voice connected in, Tahara, that you wanted to say that a question invites curiosity and openness, and it can also be terrifying as it pushes us to open our eyes and look at invisible aspects of a situation. Do you know what I mean? 100%. Thanks for bringing up. Other thoughts or reflections on that? It can be very disconcerting as we ask together. I see, yeah, Tara's looking, they're getting connected, it looks like, to audio. But thoughts on that, sort of the full range of feelings that a question can bring up, right? Thinking about that back to sort of our, being in our body.
Yeah, I'll just say I think possibility is just as terrifying as certainty.
Mm.
For a lot of people, it feels expansive and both infinite and definite in the same way. So just what comes to mind when that's on the table.
And I think that's something, again, interesting for me as I go back to thinking about whether it's this children's book that I wrote, but also this reality, again, as I said, that something's happening in our culture, that we start as these curious creatures naturally, and then we stop asking. And I think there's something to that, Tara and Mitch too. I mean, both of the what are we getting rewarded? We get rewarded for answers. And there is an expansiveness of sort of staying in that questioning, not knowing, overwhelming possibility space. And so I think that's something interesting for us to think about too, if we're serious about creating, cultures. What are the ways that we can help to continue to cultivate curiosity and question asking? And part of that is learning to deal with that feeling, right? To sort of normalize that feeling and not let it also paralyze us. And so it's such a good point, Tahara. Thank you for bringing that up. I know compliance and reward, Mitch, it is the nature, especially of our, not just, we go from our education system to our organizational systems, right? That they're not designed to really reward us for staying in an inquiry space, typically, depending on the nature of the work people are doing. So, looking at time, I know we have about 5 minutes or left or so, but other things bubbling for people on this nature of questions in your own life, tools, insights that you have of this, staying with the question, even as we grapple with maybe the discomfort sometimes that creates.
Lindsay, something that you just sparked for me, talking about organizations also not being set up for curiosity, the leader as coach concept, because employees just want to be told what to do. Organizations traditionally have been set up for leaders just to tell, sorry, my camera is bouncing around all over the place. Organizations are set up for leaders to tell people what to do. Don't ask questions, just do it. But of course, the evidence suggests that leader as coach, and by actually asking questions rather than telling team members what to do, encouraging them, enabling them to think for themselves, will create a much better outcome for everybody and a much better organizational culture. But yeah, we're not set up for that.
I love that, Leanna. It's so true, right? And the more expertise often that we have, ironically, right, the less sometimes we are curious, or sort of there's this interesting tension between sort of expertise, or also within organizations, yes, role expertise, and this perception too of, again, the should, what should a leader be like. And I love that there's actually a shifting happening in the leadership literature and conversations now of sort of poking at this idea that, leaders aren't the ones who have all the answers. Leaders aren't effective leaders. Effective leaders in today's world are not the ones that have all the right answers, but they're the ones that are helping to ask the big, bold questions and inspiring others to co-create the answers. There's a wonderful article in Harvard Business Review, which I don't usually point to Harvard Business Review, but I love it when they have something that helps sort of mainstream something that I that I value. So they had this great, John Hagel is a thought leader in leadership, and he has an article called "Good Leadership is All About Asking Good Questions." And I'll share with you this quote that he had in it, because it's a little cheeky and pretty powerful. He says, "You think you have all the answers to all the important questions? That suggests that you're either clueless or you have no idea how rapidly the world is changing, or that you're lying." Instead, leaders should ask powerful and inspiring questions, conveying that they don't have all the answers, and solicit others to help find them. You can learn to ask questions. If you can learn to ask questions well, it can help you connect with others. Thinking together can put you on the path to solving intractable problems and sparking innovative thinking. I love that quote because it's so what you just said of the, again, even challenging this assumption we have of followers that, a leader should have the answers, versus actually a leader needs to create a space where we're sort of, again, co-constructing the answers together, things that our community, the Taos community, knows so well. And to really, again, recognize that we have to stay in questions, because even those answers are going to expire. So,
Lindsay, I'm wondering, the last few minutes that we have, if you could say a word about how you tie this into the work that you do with climate change. I know you had an event earlier this month, I think, and you do a lot of work with David Cooperrider on the climate crisis, and how that's so tempting sometimes to look for answers or solutions when we're looking in such a distant future. And how do you see, bless you, I'll give you a moment.
Using, I'm sorry. No, it's a great question. And I think that goes back to, and I love what Tahira's bringing up with this sense of anxiety too. I mean, Alex, your work, I so appreciate your work in this, of like the questions of what does the future look like? What is it going to look like? Can be so anxiety inducing in us. And so again, a big piece of the work that we're doing, David and I and others, in inviting or talking about this, we call this earth shot moment that we're in, this moment that we have as a human community to, just like the moon shot, right? Putting a person on the moon. We're in this very impactful decade where every sort of action that we take individually and collectively really has an impact in sort of this tipping point for our global community. And so you're very much right, Alex. A lot of our work is sort of grounded, of course, from appreciative inquiry in questions. And a piece of that is getting it similar to what we were just talking about, of like the tying, though, for us, there's a real importance, like from hope theory, right? That we have to have a sense of willpower, of why power, why are we doing something, and way power, like efficacy, like we have to be able to see paths of action that we can actually take. And so for us, one of the questions that we've really been sitting in and sort of collectively raising is like, where are these examples, what people have called sort of real utopias, like grounded real examples that are here today, that if we scaled up could make a real difference, right? So there are things that aren't sort of off in the distance. It's like, we have the technology, we have the different things that can make a difference in our climate work today. And so a big thing for us is sort of holding this collective curiosity of where are these things? Where are the levers? Where are the examples that could really become tipping points? And how do we share these examples in a way that sort of helps to breed and inspire a sense of possibility in people? Because again, a big piece of it, as you know, Alex, is that, when we're living in sort of that fight or flight, when we're sort of our amygdalas have been hijacked every time we talk about climate crisis, like our prefrontal cortex insertion, and we don't think about possibilities anymore and what we could do. And so how do we help to sort of recognize that and sort of hold that space? And how are we sort of bringing in, again, these examples that, again, from hope theory, are sort of giving people that sense of way power. There is a way forward to take action, micro or macro, so that we're sort of building not just hope, but confidence and capacity for people to show up. Because if people are just staying in sort of the fear space, it can be hard sometimes to want to move to action. So it's sort of this blending of how do we hold the space of anxiety and fear that we all have, and at the same time sort of create sort of those motivations even in micro ways to still take action. So that's a lot. That's just sort of
I so appreciate how, yes, sometimes questions are associated with uncertainty and anxiety, and your work and all of your work is showing us too that questions are so much tied with possibilities as well, and creating hope and bringing out the best in people, in systems, in conversations and relationships. So thank you so much for your beautiful, beautiful book. Congratulations again, and thank you for being here and hosting this conversation. Thank you everyone for joining us from all over the world. And again, the recording will be available in the Taos comments, and feel free to continue to interact, continue to connect with Lindsey with questions or comments and thoughts. It's really available to everyone to use. So with this, we wish you a good day, good evening, good night. Thank you, Lindsey.
Thank you all. Thank you. Keep asking questions that you love, inviting others to do the same. I know you will. If any community will, it's this one. So thank you.